Revenge films.
My husband left me alone when I was in labor. One day when I was about 10 months pregnant, I went into the hospital for labor. I was thrashing around in my hospital bed from the most unbearable pain I had ever experienced. Ow! It hurts! I heard that being in labor is intense, but the contractions were even more excruciating than I expected. My husband was beside me, rubbing my back and doing his best to comfort me.
Are you all right? You can do it.
My husband had always wanted to be there when the baby was born, so he asked for a day off from work. Suddenly, his phone rang. He stopped rubbing my back and picked up the phone. He seemed shocked and he said,
Are you serious?
Then he started calling other people. I knew from the look on his face that something wasn't right. But because I was in so much pain, I didn't have the energy to ask him what the issue was.
Hey, did you hear about Agnes? Which hospital was she taken to?
Even though I was in pain, I recognized that name. Agnes is a childhood friend of my husband's. He asked about Agnes on the phone, but I couldn't pay much attention to what he said. Then I heard some kind of noise. What? My water broke! Call the doctor! I panicked and started screaming at my husband.
I'm sorry, there's an emergency. I gotta go.
He left me alone and ran off. What the hell just happened? At that time, I suppose I should have said something like, wait a second, or I'm gonna have a baby now. Where do you think you're going? But I was in too much pain to even ask or stop him. I couldn't think straight in pain and panic. So I desperately called the nurse. The hospital only allowed one visitor for each patient, as per their infection control guidelines, and my husband was my visitor. After he left, there was no one left to accompany me. I explained to the nurse that I needed to call my sister because my water broke, and my husband, who was supposed to be with me, left. Hi, sis! I was clenching my phone and screaming in pain occasionally, while I explained the situation to my sister. She replied, What? Your water broke, but your husband left? What the heck? Don't worry, I'll be right there. My sister always looks out for me, and she was already given birth twice. After calling my sister, I went through more intense labor contractions alone for a while. Shortly after, I was moved to a birthing bed. Then a nurse smiled and said, Your sister came just in time. I heard my sister's voice echoing in the room. You can do it, Sally. You're doing so well. 20 minutes later, a healthy baby girl was born. That's where my memory ended. When I woke up, I looked at the hospital ceiling and didn't know where I was. Where am I? My sister stood up and said, Sally, you're awake! Thank goodness. Is the baby all right? Yes, the baby is fine, but you lost too much blood, so you were rushed to the emergency department. Oh, I see. My sister stayed with me the whole time, but my husband didn't show up. I couldn't get out of my bed for a few days. My sister took care of everything. I gradually recovered and I was able to see the baby. Here is my baby! You're so cute! Yeah, she's so adorable, isn't she? Then I asked my sister about my husband. To my surprise, my sister contacted my mother-in-law to find out what happened.
Are you okay, Agnes? How did this happen to you?
He even tried to go inside the ICU, but he was stopped by the nurses. Even though Agnes's family knew my husband from before, they were confused about the relationship between Agnes and my husband because of the way my husband was acting. Agnes's mother couldn't understand the situation, so she called my husband's mother. My mother-in-law was shocked when she heard that my husband was at Agnes's hospital instead of being with me during my childbirth. My mother-in-law hurried to the hospital and questioned my husband. Why are you here? Did you leave Sally alone by herself? My husband yelled.
Don't get between Agnes and me.
My mother-in-law was beyond confused. Both moms started to doubt that my husband was having an affair with Agnes. Later, when Agnes woke up, she looked surprised to see my husband. Huh? What are you doing here? The mom's two eyes widened after hearing what she said. When Agnes was asked if she and my husband were having an affair, she denied it. Both moms were completely baffled by what was going on. After my husband heard that I was in a bad state, he ran back to my hospital.
Sally, I'm so glad you're okay. How's the baby? I heard you were in danger. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if anything happened to you and the baby.
He started to weep, but he didn't look sincere to all of us. After all, it was the fact that he left me when I was in labor. The reason why he went to find Agnes was still unclear. My mother-in-law guessed, maybe he's having a secret crush on Agnes. I wasn't convinced. A few days later, my friend came to my hospital to congratulate me. My friend works at the same company as my husband. She told me about my husband's mysterious behaviors at the company.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I heard you had a lot to deal with.
Yeah, it was hectic.
At work, your husband always acts like he's some kind of tragic hero and keeps telling everyone how unfortunate he is. He's really full of himself.
As soon as I heard what my friend said, everything made perfect sense to me. My husband gets overly excited at the idea of being the center of attention in a tragic situation. This reminded me of an old story my mother-in-law once told me. Apparently, my husband hated his dad when he was alive. But when his dad passed away, my husband cried loudly at his funeral and said,
"How can you leave me like this, Dad? Why?"
My mother-in-law found it strange that my husband was crying so hard at the funeral, as if he was very close to his dad. Suddenly, I had an interesting thought. My husband probably likes to use other people's misfortunes to liven up his own drama. This thought was the last piece to the puzzle. My husband's behavior all made sense to me at last. After much thought, I decided to divorce my husband. People might think I made the decision because he ran off when I was in labor, but the real reason was that I realized what kind of person he is. As an egotistic person who seeks attention and drama, my husband is very likely to abandon my child in the future like he abandoned me at the hospital. What worries me the most is that he will probably act the same way as when his dad passed away. Try to draw all the attention to himself by being the most unfortunate person. How can I trust my child with someone like that? I told my mother-in-law about my thoughts as well as my decision to divorce my husband. Her face turned pale as she remembered other similar incidents happened in the past. My husband was surprised when I told him I wanted a divorce.
Why? It was my childhood friend in the hospital. I came back to you after, didn't I? Of course I was worried about you too.
When I was in labor, you left my side and went to some childhood friend of yours, someone I had never even met. How is it possible that I can still be with a man who abandoned me for days when I needed support the most? Are you crazy? My husband didn't see anything wrong with what he did. Instead, he kept saying he was indeed the most miserable man in front of his colleagues when he was at work. His colleagues said,
"Huh? Obvious it was your fault. You left your wife alone during labor to see another woman. It's only natural that your wife would despise you." I mean, what were you thinking? Seems like you'd rather go to a childhood friend who has nothing to do with you. Are you okay in the head?
Apparently, things didn't quite go in the direction my husband imagined. His colleagues all looked at him like he was insane. Finally, he agreed to the divorce and paid me spousal and child support. According to my friend, he continued to tell other people how unfortunate he is, to the point that everyone started to feel that there was something wrong with him. Shortly after, there was nobody around him anymore.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.